Okay, so from last week, Sharon, you were going to complete chapter 2. How'd that go?
I did.
Yay!
I started chapter 3.
Good work.
Right.
Awesome. Diana, you were just going to keep working?
I did.
2 for 2. Lizzie's not here. Kelly, you were going to finish going through the next draft of your manuscript. Does that sound right? Yeah, you got that done. Awesome. Rabia, you were going to keep on writing and clean up. Clean up. I imagine that refers to a piece of writing.
Yeah, I did some editing and did some writing.
Sure. John, you were going to work on 1 or more, 2 more chapters.
Yeah, I didn't get any writing done, but talking with Mark, I got a good idea and outline for the next chapter.
Awesome, I love it. Mike, you were going to work on raising the tension a notch. How'd that go?
Oh yeah, I did. I added some parts. It works pretty good. I got some questions to ask later on.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Susan, you were going to get started on chapter 1.
I did, and I got well, let's see, I've got a very rough draft of it, and then I started doing a synopsis of my plot line one by one to just sort of try to mold how I wanted to fit things in, so it wouldn't be redundant.
Excellent. Good work, everybody. And that's it. Signy and Lizzie are not here. Did I miss anyone? Somebody raising their hand? No. Mark, you weren't here. That's why I missed you.
My
brain.
That's why I couldn't remember what the heck I said last week. Well, I had a full week incorporating those suggestions my first editor gave me of Tommy Blue. She sent me many pages every day, so it was a night's work every night. Now that that's been shoved away from the dock, I've got months of research to do for my next novel before I continue any further.
Okay.
And that's going to be fun. I like to read history books.
You like it. Yeah, good. All right. Well, it was a productive week for everybody. I'm happy to hear it. Last week we were talking about conflict as the second element of tension, and we're going to finish up. It'll be probably a pretty short lesson today on talking about uncertainty and withholding, which are other elements of tension. So let me pull that puppy up. All right. Sorry in advance to those of you who get stumped with the writing exercises. I'll have to figure out some other alternative for you guys. Some other homework. Go walk around the room and I don't know, come up with it. Write a poem in your head. No, that's the same task. Okay, so we've talked about danger, physical and emotional or psychological danger. So anytime you can sort of up that sense of peril. We've talked about conflict, which is that art of opposing forces, both external and internal. And now I want to talk a little bit about uncertainty, which is very basic, I guess you could say. It's just it's also another form of calling suspense. We've reached the hour where I stop making words. Gonna have to start these classes at 9 a.m. next session. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that uncertainty is another word for suspense. One of the reasons that I don't always call it suspense is that I find people get confused and think that means they have to write a suspense novel or story. And that is not what I'm saying. It is simply creating a state in which your characters do not know what is going to happen next, as well as your reader doesn't know what's going to happen next. So anytime you have predictability, you're killing tension, and you're killing it for the reader and of course, even for the character. So this is of course, difficult to achieve, or it takes forethought. In order to build uncertainty, you have to be able to kind of think ahead. So for a lot of us in our first drafts, we don't have enough of it because it's not until we've written the story that we come back to it and we go, oh, okay, well here it's kind of obvious to the reader what's going to happen. And additionally, I find sometimes that writers will do a thing I call telegraphing, which is where you almost tell the reader in advance what the character's about to do. And this is sort of different than uncertainty, but while it's on my mind. So if you ever find yourself telegraphing, like he knew he had to hold up the bank. And then in the next scene, he's there with the gun, robbing the bank. like a lot of times when your character arrives at a decision moment, I notice writers will write that down, like, and then he knew what he finally had to tell her he loved her. Like, that's great. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, except that it's tension killing. So if instead of showing us the moment of decision, you show us the moment of action, you have a more powerful scene. Okay, so uncertainty is essentially, not knowing what's going to happen next. It can create anxiety both inside the reader and inside the protagonist. And while in real life we don't relish necessarily creating anxiety in fictional landscape, it's welcome and keeps us reading. So uncertainty can be created through waiting, through not knowing, through not being able to anticipate another character's behavior or goals. And additionally, surreality. So when things seem too good to be true or too strange, you can create this feeling of uncertainty. An example of that, I think I might have this in a later slide, has anyone read The Life of Pi?
Yes.
And that a few of you have. And this is a story that has a lot of what I would call surreality, where you're not quite sure if what is happening is real or not. The general premise of the story is this young Indian boy, I think he's from India, his family runs a zoo, they have to move, it's a long story, they're on a boat, bad weather, boat goes down with all the animals. He ends up in a boat, a little tiny life raft with a tiger, and he has to survive at sea for forget how long, months. And it's like, the descriptions are plausible that what he does could happen, but there's enough moments in it where you go, huh? And then you sort of find out at the end of the book that question of whether it's real or not is part of the story. It's built in, cooked into the story. Anyways, that's a really good example of when a book has a feeling of surreality. Another thing you often see, and this is a technique that you see a lot in film and you see it in books, is when the happy family moment, maybe it's not family, maybe it's couples, where everything is really happy and everyone's really getting along, and it just gives you this icky feeling in your gut that something's about to go wrong. So it's like when it's too good, then the reader starts to go, uh-oh, what's coming next? So that's a technique you can actually use if you're trying to kind of build foreshadowing without foreshadowing, kind of just creating an energy of, yeah, it's good now, but it's not going to stay this way. It can also sometimes be like the last moment when things were good for characters before the chaos. So I've gotten, because I read so much, I've gotten to the point now where it's like, as soon as I read a scene like that, I'm like, oh crap, it's bad, So, but for the average reader, it will do a nice job of creating some uncertainty. So you're creating tension, of course, because you're basically putting into the protagonist's mind the question of whether or not they're going to achieve their goal, survive their dangerous obstacle, get what they want, go where they're going, etc. I'm a big fan of creating uncertainty by keeping relevant information that they want out of reach. Maybe they're waiting for news about cancer diagnosis, a pregnancy test, whether someone survived an accident. Maybe it's more waiting along the lines of you were injured in an accident and now you might have 6 months to recover. Waiting is a powerful tool of uncertainty. Oh, and here's the surreality slide. I knew it was in there somewhere. So because this is a short lesson, we're going to get to the writing exercises quicker. Oh, there's one more slide. Good. The other thing, and the harder thing to do in terms of uncertainty, is creating it within the plot or narrative arc of your story, because this is where you really have to be able to figure out where you need to know what comes next so that you can set it up in such a way that the reader doesn't see it coming. And again, you may not be able to do this in your first draft. This may be something I'm a go in and grout up the plot holes after I've written the story kind of person. I admire people whose brains work in such a way that they can just write the story with a whole plot. Additionally, antagonists create uncertainty by putting those obstacles, laying down obstacles for the protagonist, creating situations of danger. And anytime the antagonist sort of seems to have the upper hand from a power dynamic, you create uncertainty because the protagonist and the reader don't know how much power the antagonist has, how they will wield it, what will happen. So these are powerful ways of, and you want to utilize your antagonist. If you have a person, especially, but even forces working against your character, you want to make sure that you are using them to high effect and that the reader is has that sense of like, oh, what's going to happen now, you know? And even within your own true story, if you're working on memoir or essay, be looking for moments in your own story where you can say, in this moment, I didn't know what was going to happen next. I was, you know, there was uncertainty, there was not knowing, and see if you can highlight those moments in your story to build that same kind of fictional technique. Additionally, when characters experience loss and defeat, grief, these moments can catalyze plot uncertainty because it can do all kinds of things. Oftentimes characters behave a little out of character when they have had a loss, or they act out. They might become irrational. They might have knee-jerk reactions. So those kinds of things, the loss, the defeat, the grief, can be very effective at catalyzing this tension again of, what's going to happen? How are they going to behave? Will they be having a healthy approach to this, or will they be acting out? And of course, because for the fiction writers among you, the more interesting route to take is when your character behaves badly. always take your character down the behaving badly road when you have a choice. I'm a big fan. And it's funny. I'm continually reminded of that when I'm reading, especially something that's kind of like a bestseller, how much we're just sort of drawn to the train wreck of other people's lives, you know? Anyways. All right, here it comes. Those of you who don't want to write, you can go take a break or something. I want you to write a scene in which your character, again, scene meaning as far as you get in the time we have, in which your character does not know the outcome of something major that could have a very large impact on them, and is trying to figure out what to do with themselves in the meantime. And it could be a dramatic scene where there's actually danger, or it could just be something, these are some examples, waiting on test results, waiting to find out if someone survived an accident, wondering where the gunshots are coming from, who's making the scary phone calls. You can see I had a lot of 80s horror movies. What I'd like you to do is to try and just focus on less thinking and more, you can do dialogue, you can do action and sensory imagery, like how do they feel, heart pounding, choked throat, whatever. But also consider whether or not maybe your character might behave badly or act out when they are in the state of stress. So lots of suggestions, but wherever it goes and whatever comes out is fine. Okay. So I will give you time to write.
Okay. How much time do we have?
Usually give you 7 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Find a resting spot. Don't be a brat, Pickles. All righty, so let's go around. Anyone want to volunteer first, or I can just call on you? No? Oh, Sharon, are you talking? You're muted.
I'll volunteer to get it out of the way to say that I've had 4 false starts and I didn't get anywhere.
Do you want to read any false start?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Kelly, what about you?
Sure. Okay. I need to be moved to first class, I say. The flight attendant doesn't hear me because she's not standing next to me because I haven't hit the call attendant button and the passenger is sitting on either side of me. Window seat, aisle, me in the middle are pressing against me like I'm a waffle on a waffle iron. I need to be moved to first class, louder this time, and everyone starts to get uncomfortable. I watch the dumb flight attendants up ahead whisper to each other and look my way, saying, look at that orphan, that pathetic, sad little orphan who doesn't even know she's an orphan yet because her dad isn't dead yet, but almost. I press the call button and stand up because I can't breathe with these big fleshy passengers spilling themselves onto my lap, smothering me with their dumb flesh. We'll try to keep him on life support, my mom had said on the phone when it rang, and I crawled out of a stranger's bed in Cape Town to answer. Until you can get here, she said, so try to get here fast. Cape Town to Johannesburg, Johannesburg to JFK, JFK to LAX. Flight attendants are amassing, walking towards me. When parents are about to die, you move the bereaved to first class, I say. Are you that dumb not to know that? I don't even have to say it loudly because it's so obvious, and everyone on the plane agrees because they are staring at me now too.
Wow. I always can count on you to write something fascinating in like 5 or 7 minutes. I love that. Excellent. Thanks, Kelly. Diana, would you like to read? Oh, it looks like you're muted. Oh, you got it.
Okay. In the Central Valley, they call it the Thule fog. She was thinking of the gray cat they once had named Thule when the fog dropped and she was engulfed as she crossed into the Pacheco Pass. It was so thick she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Remember, there had been a red car, an SUV, cresting the hill minutes before that had disappeared just before she did. Guess. It must have been going 65, but it would have been slower now, 45, maybe like she was, or less. What was behind her? A large truck carrying new cars strapped on the back. It would slow, but how much? The driver must do this all the time. He wouldn't be scared like she was. She slowed to 35. Lights on, but it wouldn't make much difference. Then she caught a glimpse of light. Was that it? Then some red. Shit.
Great. Good work. All right. Rabia, would you like to read? Yeah, you're muted.
I don't feel like I did it justice. I didn't really have the uncertainty part, but I could read it anyway.
Yeah, read it anyways. It's whatever comes out is fine.
The dean called Charlene into the office and looked at her sternly through his bifocal glasses. I see here that you've skipped Spanish class 2 times in the past month. I know you're a good student, so I'm wondering what is happening with you, Charlene. Charlene sat still, unable to speak. She was sure that no one would care if she and her friends skipped Spanish class since the teacher should have retired years ago. Mr. Morgan, we were told to make Christmas cards in class. We are not in kindergarten. We are seniors. Charlene said. She made sure that she didn't seem angry and kept her fidgety hands in her lap away from his view. Charlene, just because you're bored in class doesn't mean you can be absent from class. You will be getting a detention for this. And then I was going to have her raise her voice and say something back.
I would disagree that there's no uncertainty. I think just the very act of walking into a principal's office is rife with uncertainty. So I think you did a great job. Yeah.
Okay.
Who would like to go next? Anyone? Mark?
I'll go.
Oh, Mark and then Mike. First,
Yeah,
Mark.
Mark go first. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Keys jingling, I opened my door, then glided inside, stopping cold. Someone was in my apartment, someone uninvited, some drug addict, thief, or killer. I dropped my bags, ready to bolt, but didn't. Staring at me was a woman who looked exactly like me, a perfect reflection. Same clothes, same tote bag, same 2 bodega bags on the table in front of her. The thick green ones Saba used for his best customers. I didn't know what to do. Apparently, neither did she. My eyes locked on the mirror image. I reached back with my left foot, hooking the door, swinging it shut. We stared. Eyes locked, staring for what seemed like 5 minutes. Neither of us spoke, not a single sound. She shifted her weight from left to right. I took a step forward. We both started talking at once. Who are you? What are you doing here? Why do you look like me? Where did you come from?
Oh, I love it. I want to read more. Good
Well,
work.
it's a short story I wrote. It's in a short story I wrote.
Thanks, Mark.
Free on my website.
Hey, cool. Mike, you had said you want to go.
Okay. All right. Hey, I had about 3 false starts too. So
Okay.
with me. All right. You know, okay. He smelled the weed first, a hempy smell that was unmistakable. He had hiked past the marijuana patch, his pack getting heavier. He didn't want the owners to see him. This area, the farmers weren't the proverbial peace-loving weed growers. They were people that were into money, and they wanted to keep it to themselves. The weed grown in this area, anyway, when I rounded a large boulder, I said there were 3 heavily bearded men sitting down and passing around their pipe. The patch was maybe a square acre, lots of weed for the national forest. Then I started walking quicker because they were looking at me and I didn't really like it. I began to climb up the canyon side to get back to the trail that I lost. Then I heard the brush snapping behind me, snapping pretty quick. I slipped on some rocks. My knee burned. Got back up, kept going. The snapping in the brush behind me was going faster. I thought of things in my head. I had an itchy spot in my back because I had noticed a 30-30 leaning against a tree back by the farmers. Then I thought, were they trailing me? Then I heard a shout, "Hey, buddy, you dropped your flashlight."
That's great. Cute. I like it. He thought they were following them and they were just trying to return his flashlight. I get it.
Yeah, they've I live right by a national forest, Los Padres National Forest.
Oh, wow.
In Santa Barbara County, and they grow a lot of that herb there. And the people, not that I know a lot, I don't, but they've got a reputation for being unfriendly if you find where they're growing their stuff.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, thank you for that. Susan, you want to go ahead? And unmute yourself first. I know, so annoying.
No, that's right. I was too busy eating and listening. Anyway, a few blunders, but in her gut, she knew it would be bad. Why she knew, she couldn't say. But every movement she saw was in slow motion. The woman who dabbed a Kleenex to her eyes, the nurse looking up to a man standing in front of her desk at the reception area. She couldn't breathe. She had to remind herself to breathe. And then she heard her name called, and it sounded like she was underwater. They showed her to a windowless room to wait for a doctor. And she waited. She almost didn't hear what he said, or rather, didn't until the doctor said, "When he wakes up, you can tell him."
Oh, that's it. I love it. I always love those kind of moments.
That's good.
Very nice.
I wrote more.
Oh, sorry. What was that?
No, I had written more and it was terrible and I crossed it out.
Oh, you guys are also self-judgmental today. Oh my goodness. John, any luck today?
Actually, I came up with an idea, but I'll let that go. That's as close as I got. So
Hey,
I know
all right,
I'm a
all
good
right.
start.
Progress. Good. Well, good work, everyone. Did I get you all? Okay. All right. And let's talk just briefly about withholding. It's pretty simple. Here's Grumpy Cat. I mean, I don't even feel like I should have to spell this out, but withholding is the act of not giving someone something they want or not when they want it. And this is both true of the protagonist and the reader. So keeping the reader wanting. I'm listening to a book right now on audio, and she ends every chapter at this, always right in the middle of, or at the moment of some conflict happening, where she ends it so that you just have to keep going, because it's always like, oh, she's poised over the cliff about to fall, no, I mean, and they are cliffhangers, but they're not all like life or death cliffhangers, but she just has this way of knowing how to end it right when you want more. And it's really a brilliant strategy. So that's a good thing to consider in your scene and chapter endings. But also, again, you know, I've said this a lot, right? That happy, nice people make for boring fiction, and that is true when all of their goals and desires are being met. Then after a while, the reader's just going to start to feel like, okay, well, it's all working out for them. Why do I have to keep reading? We are fascinated by the danger, the darkness, the complexity. You know, the more peril your protagonist is in, the better. So,
Got a question.
Yeah.
That book you're reading, listening to on audio, does the author pick up the scene immediately in the next chapter, or
There are
come back to it later?
She's got 4 or 5 point of view characters, so she moves to the next character. So eventually, when you come back to that character, it picks up where the last scene left off. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can do that too if you only have 1 point of view character. It's really just what you're trying to do is create a pause, not a stop, right? You're trying to keep the reader feeling like, oh, if I put this book down now, I'm going to miss out on that next thing I need to know. So you kind of just, you know, eventually it's like, oh, I got to go to bed or I have to go to work. So they have to stop it somewhere. But you want to kind of you don't want readers to get to the end of a scene or chapter and feel like it's easy to put it down. And that's something I see constantly in the manuscripts that I edit, is the too tidy ending for scenes and chapters. So in terms of withholding, there are lots of things that you can withhold from your protagonist to create this tension. So this is just like the shortest of lists. You can withhold intangible things like approval, respect, esteem from other characters that they admire or want those things from. Of course, you can withhold material possessions, and this can be such things as they lose their job, their car breaks down. You know, it's like when I say withhold, I don't mean like you literally like take it out of their life, but so much as remove the function of it from their life. Obviously, withholding romantic union, particularly professions of love, consummation, all of those things, the longer you can stave that off, the more tension you will create. As well as withholding information. So every scene, right, you have your character's got a goal or an intention. They want something, they need to do, learn, go somewhere, get something. And you want to make sure that that goal is not easily achieved. So whether or not you withhold it for the entire scene or you withhold it over a couple of scenes is not so important as much as you're trying to build that energy. And I think that this is all more organic and intuitive when you actually get down to the writing. It's like, oh, they want this, put some obstacles in their way. Maybe they have a fight with their boss. Maybe, you know, there's a million ways to create obstacles. It's all different within the context of your story. So we're not going to write, but I want us to do this aloud. I want each of you to think of a tangible and possibly an intangible thing that you could withhold. So an intangible thing could be like his father's approval. The respect of the faculty, the dean of the school of medicine or something, right? And a tangible thing could be the promotion at work that they want or something. So let's just go around and I know maybe you need a minute to think, but let's see if we can do it on the fly. So a tangible thing, an intangible thing. Susan, can you think of a tangible thing and an intangible?
I missed something. Was it withheld from the protagonist or the antagonist?
Protagonist. Antagonists, we don't care about them today.
Oh, I know. I love holding things.
I know, that's great. No, you want to, right now we're worried about your protagonist.
Oh, shoot. I had a whole idea about that one.
Well, I mean, hey, if that's on your mind, go for it.
Well, that's all right. Anyway, yeah. Well, I've got a lot of stuff from my protagonist that withholding, and I think kind of read about that last week a little bit. But,
just tell us.
Being able to live the way she wants to live, or thinks she wants to live. And then when she gets what she thinks she wants to live, she realizes that's not it. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
As it goes along. That's an overarching theme.
Yeah. I like it. Good. All right. Sharon, what about you?
Well, intangible for my character would probably be not knowing whether her parents, at least initially, not knowing whether her parents were alive or dead.
Yeah.
And tangible would be being forced to stay where she is and just not being able to leave and escape.
Like her freedom or something, like
Her freedom is
her
definitely.
ability to live her life that she
Mhm.
knew. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Rabia.
So tangible would be a boyfriend.
Mhm.
Intangible would be love.
Mm-hmm. And is there already a lack of love, like in her home life from her parents, or is it just
Yeah,
that sort of,
everything
okay,
is lack of love. Yeah.
okay, got it. Good. But she's trying to find it
So,
in the form of
well,
romance.
she's trying to find it in a boyfriend, but there's other parts of it. Yeah.
Right. Good. Well, it's always good. I liked actually both of you are bringing up the point that it's good for your character to think they want one thing and then to discover along the way that they actually want something else or need something else. It's like that Rolling Stone song, you know.
You don't get what you want.
Yeah. But sometimes you get what you need. So I love that kind of context. So think about that too, that your protagonist, because in the beginning of the story, particularly beginning to the midpoint, your protagonist is less enlightened about themselves, their fears, their wants. So there are things that are unknown to them, right? You want to kind of create a character who's less fully realized at the beginning. And so in order to do that, then there has to be something that they think they want, but it might turn out not to be what they want. John.
Okay, was this more about like some person in your story, or is it just in general?
I mean, ideally it's your protagonist that we're talking about, but if you have another expression of that, tell me.
Well, I can go with protagonist. It would be she's making a film. Whether is it going to get made or is it not going to get made, which is a very tangible thing. And the other is her approval in society for herself, whether she's good enough to do this. Is she a good person?
Right. And oftentimes what's intangible is related to things like backstory wound. So what they didn't get in their childhood or some pain they've suffered or some slight that's happened to them. Whereas the tangible is often more present moment related, like what they need right now, what they're seeking right now versus, how they've been wounded or haunted or, I mean, I believe every person who grows up in a family has wounds. I don't care how happy your family was, whether you do or not is another story. So, Mark.
Okay, 793 AD, Linden's Farm, Monastery, Viking invasion, first one in England or Ireland. 7-year-old boy.
Mm.
Mother tells him to run to the monolith, which is in the middle of this island, and hide, and she'd be along. He ends up being rescued by a monk after the attack. They can't find his mother and father, but then a lot of people have been bludgeoned and sliced, and there's just too many. Hundreds of people were killed. And I was going to have them killed, but now I'm thinking maybe I'll have them taken away as slaves, and he can run into them later in life. Because he's going to go with this monk to Ireland and get trained, and it takes his whole life. And so perhaps he will find them or hear news of them.
Yeah.
So removal of parents.
Well, that's a big one, and the potential that they could still be alive can also create yearning and desire that could still be thwarted because they might not reunite. So that's always good. Diana.
Okay, I was thinking that my protagonist, the tangible thing could be not being able to complete the project to her own satisfaction. And the intangible could be, lacking insight or not having enough information or knowledge or whatever she needs to reach that goal.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and that's the thing is the things that are intangible can be really simple, like basic human desires, right? To accomplish something, to know something, to connect with someone. So they don't have to be lofty goals. They can just be human goals. Yeah. Kelly.
For tangible, I had a confession, an admission of guilt from someone.
Oh yeah.
And then the intangible would be truth. So.
The unknowable, ineffable truth. Yeah, I like that. Mike.
Yeah, the tangible one for my character is that can be withheld as land. You know.
Yep.
So
Fan-
that's pretty valuable where he's at. And then intangible would be love and acceptance by a family.
Mhm. Yeah, great. All of these are great. So consider too that your protagonist may have multiple things you can withhold. And there might be things, also think on the scene level. What can I withhold in this specific scene? Which goes back to thwarting goals, keeping that tension high, not making things easily achieved. But it might even be interesting to make a list of some of the intangible things, because I feel like those inform character development more. So what are those intangibles? And then how can you, where and when in the story is it relevant to withhold those, or to show the struggle of wanting them, and I bet you can come up with 3 to 5, if not more, for every character or for your protagonist. And it's fine if you don't, but I'm just as something you do on your own when you're working on your manuscript, I find it to be useful. I'm not sure if I have any more slides. Let me look. And nope. All right, so I told you it was short. So we've covered all 4 of the essential elements of tension. And then in the next couple weeks, in the remaining workshop, I will probably be doing I'm thinking about doing sentence tension. So some kind of at the sentence level, I've got a lesson on that, which is really, well, I think it's fun. I don't know if anyone else will. If you'll feel like you're back in like 8th grade English class. And imagery, using images to build tension, if those sound interesting to you. Otherwise, I've got a couple other ideas, but yes.
That sounds good.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a question, Susan?
Well, given some of the feedback on my piece, and I saw some of the feedback on Mike's piece a little bit, I was wondering if you could talk about how point of view works with tension and where to make the shift and how.
Yeah, it's
a whole other course.
It is actually so here's the deal. This same time slot, I will be teaching what's called Writing the Intimate Character, which is based on the book, which is all about character and point of view. So that will be a whole class. And it is a valuable lesson, and I don't want to condense it into a short one because it's so worthy of depth. I will let you all know when that's being taught. I'm sorry to answer that with like, well, down the road, but
it's a very big thing. Yeah.
It is, and we can talk about it a little bit today when we talk about Mike's piece. But yeah, it's an issue for so many writers' point of view. That's why I wrote that book, because at the time there weren't very many books on point of view that weren't just like the driest of dry. There still aren't a lot, I think, because nobody really wants to write about it. It's, I had to find a way into the subject myself to make it interesting. Is there any other topic? That's the other thing, is this is a good time to volunteer something you would like a lesson on, because I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. So now I can be flexible.
I've got a point of view question.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask it now.
Yeah, go ahead, and we'll see if we have the time to answer it before we.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's basically I forget when it's the point of view when the person is like all knowing. Was it omniscient? What is it again?
Omniscient.
Omniscient. When a person is writing in the omniscient sense, all right, and he's got a character that's looking in the past, all right, and the character makes these flashbacks to the past. Is it okay in the middle of a flashback, maybe to jump a little bit to the side of that at the same time, as long as you're the narrator, to say about something else that's happening and then get back to the character? I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Well, I think you kind of do that a little bit in your piece. So
but I don't know if it's okay.
I think here's the thing. You can do there. Anything is okay in the sense that it can be done, and can be done. The question is it being done in a way that keeps the reader's attention and doesn't make them feel jarred out of the story? Or is it making them feel like this? So for me, the problem with omniscient that I have as a writer, as a reader, is that in order for it not to make the reader feel jarred left and right, you have to be very, very good at it. You have to be very seamless at it. And that means that you are always reminding the reader that you're in this voice. So you're always kind of coming back to it, but in a very subtle way. And so omniscient, just for me, it often lends itself to distracted storytelling and that's just because it's hard to wield, because what you're doing is you're both zooming out at a distance to offer this all-knowing perspective, telling the reader information the characters might not even know. And then you're zooming back inside, hopefully going inside the character's head. So if that process is not handled well, then it just feels like you're going, whoa, 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 whoa. So again, yeah, it can be done. And I personally think it's better to, especially if you're going to drop into a flashback, I would say stay in that flashback, then segue out into another place. But to be in flashback and then to take it a side path and then back into flashback I think it's asking the reader too much. So it's like front story, backstory, right? Front story is the story that's happening with our characters in the moment. And then they have memories about times that happened behind the front story, which are maybe relevant to the front story, which we call backstory or flashback scenes. And too much of that jumping in and out of time can just feel jarring to the reader. So I'm not talking about your piece specifically when I'm saying all this. I'm just saying in general, it is harder to master omniscient. And some writers are very good at it. And some writers, it just takes practice. I am not good at it. And maybe that's why I don't like it as much, because I'm not good at it. Yeah. Yeah, Rabia.
So you're saying that it's easier to write it in a first person so that
No, I'm saying it's easier to write it in either a third person limited or a first person. So not just first person. So there's third person limited where all you're doing, we really do need this class, don't we? All you're doing in third person limited, all you're doing is changing the pronoun from I to he or she. It's actually the same perspective as you're up inside one character's head at a time in third person limited or deep point of view. I don't know why I don't like that term, but deep third person is another way they call it. The confusion is that omniscient also uses the he, she pronouns. So we often confuse omniscient and the third person, the deep third person, because we're like, oh, it's the he, she pronoun. It must be an external narrator. But it's actually just, we're still up inside. Ask yourself this, so there's this term called locus of perception. And what it means is like, whose perspective are we inside of? And the way we recognize that is through these perceptual words, like he saw, heard, understood, knew, tasted, felt, right? These are perceptual words and they come from within a character's perception. So if I am inside someone's head, I'm going to have these perceptual words. If I'm an omniscient narrator, I can tell you information about my protagonist that is not involving perceptual words. Like he was tall with sandy tousled hair. Like very rarely do we think of ourselves that way. The character is not telling you that about himself. If he were to say, his messy hair always bothered him. That's coming from a perceptual inside the character, right? But it bothered him. It's an observational word. Is that making any sense?
He disappeared into the woods.
Okay, that could be omniscient. That could be either way.
Really?
But he ran and hid in the woods. Might be a little more third person.
So how would, if one,
It's
I
okay.
guess I'm confused between the singular and the omniscient, because to me they sound the same.
Can
you just give an example of one that's omniscient and one that's third person?
So yes, I can. Hang on. Actually, I've got an example I usually use, which if you do end up taking that class. So there's this book called Fates and Furies, and the first half of the book is written about one character, the second about the other. And it's an omniscient narrator. So the narrator can tell you information about the characters. It's like the difference with omniscient, it's like you're a storyteller standing up in front of a group of kids telling them about some people rather than those characters acting out their story on a stage, right? So the first line of this paragraph in Fates and Furies is like, Lotto was loud and full of light. And Matilda was, I don't know, there's some other description. How often do we describe ourselves as loud and full of light? That's an external observation coming from an outside perspective. So think about it as internal and external perspective. If I can tell you information about the character that is not filtered through their own mind, their own thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, it is omniscient. And then there's one other kind of variation, which is that sometimes it's omniscient only in that the narrator moves between characters' points of view within the same scene. So we're in Rabia's head, and then suddenly we're inside Mark's head, and then we're in my head, and we move within the same scene. So you can see why this is a topic that requires a 6 or 8 week class, because once you get it, you will not forget it. It's like once it clicks in, and I have examples, which is really nice. This book also is full of examples. My book, which is based on, I'm really not trying to sell you on my book, but
I like your book.
but it has, the reason is I pointed you to it is because it's full of contemporary examples of these different points of view and when and how to use them. So I know that was a long answer to a long question. Not a long enough answer though.
It is
Oh,
a good
hey.
book. I got this a couple of weeks ago, and it also has caused me to rewrite tremendously. So it may be good for understanding, but
You also got you got the last one on Amazon. I tried to buy that after you told me about it, and it's not available.
What? We've been having so much trouble with our books being stocked. It's really annoying. And anyways, what was I going to say about this? Hold on. One thought. Last thought. I don't know. But all I can say is wrestle with it. Just try to come back to this idea. You might be using he or she pronouns. If you are not sure if you're writing in the omniscient or the deep third person, or as I call it, third person intimate. If you're not sure, ask yourself, who is telling the reader this information? Is it coming from the character's head and heart, or is it coming from a narrative voice outside of them? So when it's a narrative voice outside of them telling the reader information that the protagonist themselves probably wouldn't describe themselves as, or doesn't know, then it's definitely omniscient. Okay. So that's our brief, but I do, I'm happy to answer more questions too offline, but let's take our 5-minute break. And in fact, if anyone wants me to chat at you while you go, while everyone takes their break, and then we'll come back and we'll do Mike's story or chapter.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Just chatting really quickly, and then I'm going to run off for a second. I've been toying with the idea. This is, well, first of all, I want to take that class, so please put me on your list, because I want to make sure. I think I've chosen the omniscient point of view in that I've chosen a character in my story who would know everything, who would have that's my narrator, who's not a main character, but a tangential character that you would know.
Yeah.
So I'm playing with the idea of using him as a wrap up in the prologue and an epilogue kind of thing.
That's cool.
Anyway, yeah. Well, so I've been working with that. So yeah. So I'm going to try to see. I'm trying to weave.
There's lots of ways to go about it. Like deciding who's telling the story, and that can also shape how you tell the story. But anytime you are writing, I prefer as a writer limited third person. I like the he, she pronouns because I feel like it gives just a little bit of distance between the writer and the reader, the protagonist and the reader. But we're still only inside one character's head at a time. So I have to change scenes if I want, or chapters if I want to go into another character's point of view. And yeah, Robbie.
So I'm doing a similar thing as Susan, where I'm using the older form of the character, of the 16-year-old character. So that's third person. It's limited.
It's still third person limited. It's just the older version of the character. She's looking back on her life and telling you the story. but
Right.
it can
Okay.
feel omniscient, I would imagine. I'd have to see it in writing to tell you exactly what you're doing.
Well, it's not omniscient. I actually
Doesn't
started
sound
it
omniscient.
out omniscient, and I went back and changed the whole thing to
Yeah.
limited.
I mean, when it's well done, it's well done and I enjoy it. It's just hard to do well because it just takes a lot of focus to know where you're at any given moment. And I feel like a
Okay.
lot of times it gets used with devices like this. You'll have a paragraph like, what he didn't know was around the corner, the robber was lurking, and it's like, I don't want to know that. I want to, maybe he sees a shadow over his shoulder or, I don't want to be told by an omniscient narrator that danger is lurking. I want you to show me that in scene. That's just my preference as a reader. So, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
all right, I'm going to take my quick break. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Well, Mark, it's just you and me.
Yeah, I was talking to you, but I was still muted. I'm looking forward to Tuesday at lunch. One fifth of the class is going to have lunch next Tuesday in Hampton Cove. Oh, did you see where MD has backed out of the next Tuesday Zoom
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah, I did. I think
Yeah.
he's well wrapped up in other things.
We're not as interesting as everything else he's doing. A lot of
Yeah, I think I don't know. I hope he gets through with his book.
oh,
You know,
gee, that's gonna take a year, he said.
I know. I can't. Well, I don't know the number of I guess times I've rewritten what I've got through what I've learned, and yeah, this last time that I started rewriting, it's because of this, because I feel like I'm writing the movie over San Luis Rey with 5 different viewpoints moving in and out, but it's not omniscient.
Well, I was gonna ask uh, Jordan. I've got like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You do.
I got
You
a whole
have a
bunch of
lot.
I got a whole bunch of main characters
The thing is,
because
you
they
don't really
all
go
follow
into
through.
omniscient.
They go into. I'm sorry, what?
You don't really go into omniscient though in your writing. You
Yes,
really stay with the characters when you're writing with them.
okay, well that's good, I guess. I I
Yeah,
don't
my
recognize.
problem.
I think I don't recognize this stuff when I'm writing it. I don't think about POV. I don't think about
Yeah, well,
any
you
of that
do
stuff.
pretty well with that. So
Well,
it's like,
good.
yeah,
I hope Jordan agrees. There's not too much blood on the page when I get it back.
yeah.
Uh,
My problem is I jump around and tell you about them, about the situation, about the people, and then let the people do things. And it's like everybody's got everything going on.
yeah.
Everybody's omniscient, different omniscient people. Third person omniscient is what it is.
It's hard. It's hard to master, I tell you.
Fifth
Oh,
person.
you have no idea.
You
Oh, I
said
do
fifth
have an
person
idea.
omniscient.
I do because I've tried it myself. It really admire the work of Ann Patchett.
Yeah, she's good.
She's good, and I forget which of her books I don't know if all her books are omniscient, but one of them, she had this really neat technique, I thought, for moving from character to character, because she would be in one character's head and then she would switch to another's in the same scene, and she would do it through a transitional object. So the character A would hand character B a glass, and as
Yes.
character B picked up the glass, then we were in their head, and I thought that was really clever. And it took
Passing the
me,
talking stick.
right, and it was like
That's
half the book before I even realized what she was doing. But
that's how you do it in a film. You pass the
yes,
active person
it was
from one to
very
another.
cinematic. Yeah, I like that. I thought it was very clever, and it was so seamless. I really didn't notice until I started thinking about it, and then I was like, oh, yeah. It's hard. I learned a lot about point of view by writing my book about it, and basically I learned the most by analyzing the fiction examples that I used, because there really aren't, I mean, there are other books out there, but that, they didn't, enlighten me the way I wanted to be enlightened. So not that I'm not saying my book is the end all be all. It's not, but it was just helpful to put together.
So Jordan, when you read a whole bunch of books trying to find the point of views, did you find that they kind of messed it up a lot? Or do you find that really they pretty much
No, by the time it's published, you better have your act together. I didn't always, like I said, even though some writers were good at omniscient, I still didn't always like it, but that's just my taste as a reader.
Mhm.
But, and I think that in some ways, styles change over the decades, and there was a time when everything was omniscient, like if you read a Dickens novel or something, it's like, it's not only is it omniscient, but like everything is, all the coincidences in the world happen in the novel, it's like, you couldn't get away publishing a novel like that today. And yet those books are beloved. And I like them too, but yeah, so conventions have changed. Like you definitely have first person is a much more common style of writing now. Like everybody writes in the first person, and it didn't used to be, even.
Well, got a question. I stumbled on this in your last class with my previous last book by expressing opinions as the narrator, and I think maybe you got to be very careful about doing that.
You do. That's that authorial intrusion.
It's hard. Yeah. Well, see, I didn't remember what you said, what it's called, but it's hard sometimes when you're opinionated.
It is, and especially if you're in the omniscient, then you're giving yourself free reign to do that in a way. So you have to just decide what kind of book you're writing up front, and you can do it and do it intentionally. But yeah. So, anyways, all right. So let me get Mike's piece up in front of me. Would anybody like to start? Oh, Mark, go for it. And I'm going to do the timer thing, so don't be offended when you hear the buzzer go off. Just wrap it up.
I don't think I'll go that long.
Okay.
Mike, you've got a good first draft. You're well on your way to creating a very good story. I'll mention some things that I didn't in the critique because it came to me over the last few days as I reread it a couple more times. Perhaps consider a short opening, and this is just consider. A short opening with Jiang, or whatever how you pronounce his name, arrival in San Francisco, just a paragraph maybe, and then a dot, 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 3 years earlier or something like that. Then restarting in real time present tense at when the inciting incident of a crocodile ate my friend, and move forward to there until you get back to the point where he's standing at the rail. That'll let the reader experience all that he does as it happens to him, including his trip to the Chinese port that he'd have to make, the land passage, the ship voyage. So you don't have to default to the past tense. And I think those two things, what's going on land and what he experiences, people he runs into, and the conflicts with people or the friendships he makes on the ship. I'm sure he's going to meet interesting people both ashore and at sea who are engaged in trades other than rice farming. And I think you can really flesh out the life of him in China by including, I think he only had one other trade, which was the healer woman. But everybody was a rice farmer. You can throw in both good and as well as frustrating things happening and challenges to overcome while he's traveling on land and sea before he gets to the U.S. I'm writing a historical novel myself, so I can appreciate the amount of research that goes into creating authenticity for your book. But those are just some things that popped into my head.
Great. Thank you.
I'm done.
Awesome. Yes, definitely under time. All right. Who would like to go next? Rabia. Oh, still muted. I know, it's maddening.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I found the story really interesting, and I liked that it was a historical novel. And I had all these questions where I wanted to look up stuff and just find out, like about the writing implement, where she was using a brush. I wanted to know more about what they used at that time. And I like the uniqueness of the story with the crocodile and the rice paddy. I mean, that was really unusual. you wouldn't think of that as happening. And the plague, telling about the plague and the corruption in the system with taxes, that shows that human nature hasn't changed at all from that time. And people are still looking for a better life somewhere. So it's very current to what's going on now. I like that it ended with hope as far as that part that we read, because there were a lot of tragedies. And I could relate to the protagonist right away. I felt like I was rooting for him. It was easy to read, and the conflicts pulled me in. I thought the emotional part with Zhang burying his family was really well written. It showed just some behaviors that you wrote. It showed that he was really torqued about that whole thing. And I definitely want to read more of it. It sounds like it will be a really interesting novel, and lots of opportunities for conflicts, successes, and emotional ups and downs, and historical content. So I put other things in the Google Docs as well.
Thank you. All right. Who would like to go next? Sharon.
So there was definitely tension in the story, and that was good for sure. I liked the idea that that Mark mentioned about having helping the character development by being in the present tense. So because I felt like that even though the character development was a good start, that I'd like to know more about the characters. And so, you know, as was said by Rabia, I was rooting for the character, but I think I could be rooting for the character even more if I knew the character better. And so I felt like the scene descriptions in the rice fields and the dock, the magistrate's office, the uncle when he's picking up Zhang could have been more like, I couldn't visualize them as much as I wanted to. So a little more descriptive language for the scenes, I think would have been helpful. I love reading historical fiction. And so I just really enjoyed sort of feeling like I was in 19th century China. So that's a great start. So yeah, I guess that was that was it. Yeah, just since you've done so much research on China, I imagine that you could put more descriptive language in to the characters and to the scenes. So I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Who would like to go next? Susan.
Hi, Mike. I thought you achieved an enormous sympathy for Yang. Is that how you pronounce his name? Zhang or Yang? How is that? Anyway, you know, I mean, I was just rooting for him all the way, and I love the way, with as everybody's been saying, that you piled up tension on tension in the three very distinct, difficult scenes, things that he went through. The crocodile scene where he was an observer of it, and then the participant scene where his whole family dies with the plague, and then of course the scene where he wasn't a participant at all, but he felt the after effects of you know, of losing his land and why. I had a little bit of a problem in that section, in that I kind of felt I wanted a little bit more about how he felt about that woven into it, you know, about what happened. And hold on a second, I've got my notes, but I was a little confused about the deal that was made. I don't know if anybody else was, but I was a bit confused about what that actually was and the import of it. I know what the outcome of it was, but you know, how, whether or not that needed to get done. I thought some of your writing was just gorgeous. I loved in the very beginning where you just jumped us right into China with the simple sentence, the rice fields were always weeded twice. I mean, wow, that just got me right into the rice paddy. And I think I noted in Google Docs a couple of more places where, particularly the shout out where you brought me right back into his present, where he was back on the ship. I did feel, kind of as Mark talked about, I too wondered whether or not you really wanted to go back and forth between present and not, and whether that took away from the momentum of the story and the rough stuff that went on in China that impelled him to get on that boat and to get across the ocean and start a new life. So, you know, I didn't have problems with you doing that, but I felt like I wanted that fleshed out a little bit more. And I think Mark's idea was an interesting suggestion on how to go about that. I'm just trying to think of, I'm sure there are other things that, I guess that's about it. I think everything else I wrote was on Google Docs, but it was a really good read. You kept me through. Some of your writing was just beautiful as well. I don't mean some, I mean, it went beautifully. Some of it was extraordinary. It was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, Kelly.
Thanks, Mike. There were some really lovely descriptions throughout that I really enjoyed. I think, like Sharon, it made me want more of it. Like I wanted to sort of visually see, because there were such evocative settings, that just like a little bit more, because some of it's already there, and was great. And I felt like there was room for even more resonant interactions, like more sort of emotions could be woven in just like a level deeper in a lot of the scenes. It's one of the main comments I had has to do with point of view. I was thinking about the introduction to the piece, and I wondered about doing it still in a third person, but more through Jiang's point of view. Like I wondered if doing something like, rather than calling out San Francisco, just using the phrase you have right after that about what it's called in China, and not really explaining potentially who the men were behind the table, like that, because he might not fully understand yet sort of who these people are, and that could kind of play with that confusion and fear that he may be feeling in that moment, and like, you know, could still be in the third person, but that I just wondered if that might be something to play with a little bit. Some of the dialogue, I wasn't sure if it was something that the characters would say, or it felt like stuff they might already know. And I didn't know if it was like more for the benefit of me reading it, like on the page 2, when we get the description of the field and sort of who it had belonged to and the history of the field. Part of me wondered, like, why doesn't Jiang already know this? Like, why doesn't he know that? But if he doesn't know that, that's kind of curious and interesting. Like, because it made me think, like, is he just kind of like out of the loop with kind of like the history of where he's from? And if so, what does that say? Because he wants to be distant from it. It just started making my mind think about all these other things. I think overall want more of a sense of who he is and what he wants a little bit earlier. Just so I know how he would react to even the crocodile scene. Like, what does that mean to him? Because it's very much he's observing it. And I didn't totally know how he felt about it, like, or what his relationship to it was. I was at the end.
You can wrap up your thoughts. It's
Okay.
just
yeah, and I was also curious how he felt when he was leaving the ship. That also felt like a really an important moment. And yeah. I'll stop there, but thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, who would like to go next? I think we're down to Diana and John. Diana, okay. And then John after that.
I should have gone sooner because everybody already said what the few things that I thought. But I wanted to mention that I do kind of like the idea that Mark mentioned earlier, because I felt like the story of his time in China was so hard, and I think knowing in advance that he was going to be able to leave and that he had a quote unquote new beginning coming, I think made my ability to read through the rest of it, a little easier on me, even though, I was very engaged in the story and rooting for the protagonist. So I think that idea might work pretty well. And the one other thing I think I would say is that, in the times when you go into these remembrances, you set it up as a remembrance, but when you get in there, we need to see, kind of through his eyes. And also, in the one scene where they go to the tax collector, he's not even there. So I got a little bit confused about how could he know all this detail or see it in this way, if he hadn't actually experienced it himself. But I really liked the character. I was very, rooting for him, and I thought the writing was beautiful, and I was totally impressed that you could make, the late 1800s in China so vivid and real to me, when obviously you hadn't been there yourself. So I think it's really well done. I think some of these things that I'm saying are really just sort of, structural, tweaks more than anything else. So
If you have a few more sentences, you can keep going. It's just like a 30-second warning kind of thing.
okay, well, it was great, and I really enjoyed it. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. John?
Hey, well, Mikey, I thought it was pretty good too. I think I probably started off in my review saying it reminds me of The Good Earth by Pearl Buck. And it really does. You begin to get a good feeling for how the Chinese felt about land. And that very last, Zhang's last statement, where you say Zhang spat on the ground, he's showing just how he felt about China, about all that it was providing for him. And it just couldn't have gotten any better. That's one beautiful line in there that just sets the whole thing. And then what you do is you go about showing how he arrived at that. And I don't know, I thought backstory was a pretty decent way of going about that, although there were some odd things that happened in the backstory. Diana pointed one out, where you have a point of view which was not approachable by Zhang. He's, it's just somebody else's point of view. Let's see. Yeah, first part was he got him with the crocodile, and he said that started him thinking about something to do. Then there was the the uncle who came in. That, the logical progression as you start nailing together exactly how he began to feel about what was going on after his uncle, then his parents, and then the land deals with Wang. They were all things that just built a very logical progression to why you would just pick up and leave. Although I wonder what happened to the rest of his family, when he left. There weren't many left, as you said, there were 3. I weren't sure who they were. One paragraph, there was a guy, his name was Hong, who smashed a large beetle. I couldn't figure out how he fit into the story, or his wife, but they, there was just a section. they seem to add real color to that part with his family, but I couldn't figure out why they were there other than just, sort of like a walk-on part. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. You did a good job of, when you got into the action, you did real well. You brought us right into what was happening, especially places like the crocodile scene. That was great. And I wondered about his uncle. His uncle had all kinds of money, and I was just wondering why he didn't seem to use it, because his family was well, I didn't know. I don't know about his grandfather, whether he was rich or not, or wasn't sure. So yeah, good job. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, John. All right, Mike. Well, thanks so much for submitting this piece. And I saw some of the writing prompts you had done, or at least it seemed like I saw some of that worked into the piece around the alligator or crocodile. I thought there was so much richness to this piece, and it's like, it has so many ways you can go with it and so much you can do. And I'm really excited to see what you do with it. There were a couple of just incredibly beautiful setting descriptions. I highlighted a couple sentences where you just have a real knack for just in a couple of 5 words painting a setting that evocatively. I could see it really vividly, so I felt very connected to where it was set, particularly in the past. I do agree that when we get to the present of the story, things are a little more vague, but I also think it's because we don't spend as much time there in the story. I had a similar feeling to Kelly, where I felt like I couldn't quite figure him out. Like I couldn't feel who he was inside. And I think part of it's that he's in his head a lot. And I wanted more emotional, internal, which can come in the form of thought, or it can be like sensory, bodily experience. I'm not the greatest historical researcher, but I could have sworn that Chinese coming to this country were treated with pretty horrible racism and called really horrible names and slurs. So I wondered if he might have encountered some of that right away on the boat. And that, I don't know, I don't know if that's accurate, if maybe that happened when they've been here longer or when they were building things or working on the railroads. But from people that I know who have Chinese ethnicity or family members, they've described some pretty horrible scenarios. So I wondered if maybe you could ratchet the tension up right away by, I know that on the one hand, it's like, this is what's the word? This is his fresh new start in a new country, but this would be a great opportunity for that whole, what you think you want doesn't turn out to be exactly what you want kind of moment. Maybe it does down the road, but his first impression could be, oh shit, I've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire. Like here I am and I'm not even being treated well. So that's a thought I had. But again, I'm not sure of the historical accuracy of, when and where they would have encountered that racism, but keep that in mind. I also think really the 2 biggest pieces for this piece, or your work in general, are going to be the chronology of front story versus backstory. So when to drop into the flashbacks. And then I also like Mark's sort of structural suggestion, because I think what's happening now is we're going front story, backstory, briefly front story, backstory, briefly front story. And I feel like it's like, just go from one to the other. We're in the front story, then we go into the backstory, then we transition back. But I think too much in and out can be a little jarring. And then the point of view issue, really deciding and then committing. Do I want to be omniscient? Do I want a limited third person? I feel like what I'm hearing from everyone else is that maybe omniscient is pulling us out a little too wide. Though I will say, in a historical novel, omniscient can work very well. Maybe you already read a lot of them. It might be worth reading one that does use omniscient and seeing how they do it. Because I am someone who has to study it. I have to study it to use it. It's not easy, but I could see it working if you just get that kind of seamlessness down, and that just takes time. But what I would make sure is not to sacrifice that inner experience of the character, that we really want to have closer access to him and know what he feels, what he thinks, who he is. I wanted to feel more of his fear and anxieties as well as his excitement, because that's also where tension lives, right? So we're excited about a new opportunity, but then that new opportunity means everything's unknown. And I think that must be terrifying, You know, my grandparents came to the United States from Israel, and I, you know, they spoke English by the time they came here. But even for them, well, a little bit, even for them, it was still terrifying, you know, to come to a new country and learn everything all over again. And so I think really playing up that tension of it's exciting, but it's nerve-wracking is important. But you have laid really good groundwork, and you have a lot of wonderful material here. So I have no doubt that you'll be able to do all this in your revisions. So, all right, well, that's all of us. So now it's your turn to get to say anything or ask any questions that are outstanding for you.
Okay, first I'm gonna check. No, I'm not muted. Good. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Hey, I took everything everyone said, especially the criticism to heart, you know, because I've got a lot to learn in this business. And Mark, you know, everybody did a really good job correcting me in some areas where I thought I needed some change. Mark gave me, you know, a good piece of advice on the beginning, but also on ship terminology. I'll be honest, I haven't been on, you know, active on anything bigger than a kayak. I mean, you know, and he gave them good knowledge on what decks were called and things like that, you know, and but all I can say is that, oh, and one thing I think everybody should know, my home state where I was born actually was South Louisiana, and they grow a lot of rice there, believe it or not, you know, and and that's where I got the idea. Everyone, you know, South Louisiana, especially nowadays, they do have lots of alligators. I mean, not crocodiles, but alligators, you know. And every once in a while, they do get into the fields, and then they call the Department of Fish and Game, and they comes out there and they relocate the creature, you know, take him out to the swamps or something like that, you know. And so I just thought, hey, let's move over to China where they grow a lot of rice, and I know they had a lot of saltwater crocs out there, and so I built from there. You know, it's that was a leap of faith for myself. I don't see how people could live in that area and not have problems from the crocodiles. I really don't. But I mean, I knew they weren't going to call the Department of Fish and Game. I mean, they couldn't, you know. So let's see. Once again, thanks to everybody that made that made criticism on that piece. You know, I appreciate everything, John, everybody that you did on this. And I've got a lot of it written down.
One other thing I'd recommend is that when you've really finished the draft is to really hone in on your research so that you really it's very important to get that authenticity right when you're writing about a culture that is not your own. And so that what I also would encourage is, as Mark has done, hiring a sensitivity reader who has specific experience in Chinese culture and Chinese historical culture, because you could easily get something wrong, not know it, and, you know, offend someone of that culture. So just as a, you know, down the road, once you've already really put the whole story to page, you know, do your own research and then engage someone who really has that background. It'll make sure that you've got a story that is really authentic as possible. I would never assume personally to call something authentic where I didn't know it personally, but, you know, yeah, so that's all. I just wanted to encourage you to do that. So good. All right. Well, I feel like this was good little class. Let's get our goals on paper and then we'll see you next week. So in a couple weeks, I'll be getting my second shot, and our class is the night of my second shot. Most of the people I know have said they didn't really start having symptoms till the next day, but it'll be a crapshoot. It's not next week, but the week after. So if I seem loopy, in my excuse. All right. Susan, goal for next week. Get that mute button.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, I'm just going to keep writing. I just structurally for me, I'm going to keep working on my sort of chapter synopsises to move the story through, to make sure that I'm not messing up some of the stuff I want to put in and out and all that. So, and then, you know, take my hand at just writing.
Perfect. Awesome. Diana.
Well, I'm going to send you my essay and, for critique next week. And I think I'm probably going to doodle around a little and think about maybe, what kind of project I might be interested in starting soon.
Okay. I like it. Great. Thank you. Kelly.
I'm actually gonna try to not write.
Giving yourself a break.
I'm gonna try that, yeah.
I like that. That is also a good thing to do. It's good to know when you need a break. All right. Mike.
I'm going to see if I can rework that short story of mine, that first draft, and put Jang in a little bit closer contact with a trip to the magistrate's office.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
John.
Actually, I suppose same as last week. See, try and get a chapter written or two.
All
three.
right. 1+ chapters. Rabia.
I'm going to try to write more and work on a plot. I'm putting a lot of effort into outlining, although I don't like outlining, but I'm trying to do that.
Good. I'm the same as you. I don't like it, but it does help me. Sharon.
I'm gonna work on chapter 3. And I'm curious, how many pages did you want us to submit for the reviews?
You have up to 15, I think I said.
Yeah, up to 15, you said.
Yeah, so if you don't have 15, you can submit less, but yeah, up to 15. And that's double space. What am I trying to say? Is it double spaced?
Double spaced.
Double space.
Weird memory thing where like a word will sound wrong.
Yeah.
This is not good. Anyways, double spaced. I don't know why my brain is saying that's not what I mean. Yeah, that's all I'm trying to say, is because if you submit single space, then it's actually like 30 pages. So.
And did you say what type we have to use? Like Times New
12-point font, I don't care what font, as long as we can read it.
12
Just 12-point. Yeah. Okay. And Mark.
For the next few months,
Research.
my research.
that looks like a heavy stack there.
It is. I even got a few more because I couldn't lift anymore, but that's going to be, I have to do the research before I do the writing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It will show in the writing. All right. Well, good class, everybody. I'll send out recording and slides later on, and I'll see you next week. And
Great.
have a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, Mike, did you get your books?
Yeah, I did. Okay. Thank you again. That was very nice of you. Thank you.
Okay, and while it's in my forebrain, when I publish Tommy Blue, if you want a copy, just send me your address by an email.
Yeah,
I've done that before. I've done that before in other classes. Anybody who wants the final copy, the hard copy, paperback of Tommy Blue, I'll send it to you
Thanks,
when it
Mark.
comes out.
That's nice of you. All right, y'all. I gotta go. So take it off to email now. Bye.